Hey everyone, Jared here, and this is the Flying S5 H900. Looks pretty similar to another recently released phone, doesn't it? So let's have some fun and put both beside each other. Now there is some obvious physical differences between these two, and for starters, the Flying S5 is smaller, a little bit thicker, has no water or dust proofing, and has no fingerprint scanner or heart rate monitor, but you'll notice it has the same styled backplate with all those dimples, but feels nothing like the Galaxy S5's backplate. But on the right side is the power button, which is really mushy feeling with no real click feedback, and the left is the volume rocker, which does have a little more click feedback than the power button, but still a little mushy for my liking. And on the front is the physical home button and capacitive back and menu button, which actually has the same icon as the recent tasks button, which I thought was a bit strange. Now it has a 5-inch 1080p IPS display, and on the top we have the 3.5mm headphones port, but beside that is what looks to be where the IR blaster should live, but unfortunately it's fake. But that's to be expected when taking the price into consideration at $180. So moving into the software, it's running Android 4.4.2 KitKat, which is awesome, and it looks to be about as close to stock Android as it gets. And it's also running the Google Experience Launcher. So let's dive into some settings briefly. Now, as you'd expect, it has all the typical stock Android settings, but we do have some settings that you won't typically find in stock Android, like best audio enhancer for headphones or other external audio devices, and best loudness to boost the built-in speaker volume, both of which you may as well just keep enabled considering it's lacking some hardware enhancements like those that we see in the HTC M8 and other devices. Now in the display, there's clear motion, which is actually a setting we've seen in previous Chinese phones I've reviewed recently, and yes, it actually does provide a slight improvement in video playback quality. There's also a neat lock screen style section, but unfortunately there is only the two styles, no option to download additional styles, so that was kind of a bummer. And last but not least, there's a super handy option to schedule when the device turns on and off. So for instance, if you don't want your phone wasting battery while you're sleeping, you can schedule it to turn off automatically. And as phones become more and more similar to actual computers, which they pretty much already are, just like computers, phones need to be rebooted every once in a while too, and this is a great way to have it done for you automatically. So the performance has been pretty good. I mean, it's no HTC One M8 or Galaxy S5, but it does have a MediaTek octa-core processor clocked at 1.7 GHz, a Mali 450 GPU, and 2 GB of RAM. And navigating through the device settings, launching apps, and so on, for the most part has been pretty fluid. The only time I really noticed any lag was when the device was in a standby for a long period of time, and I flew into the app tray and then launched an app really quickly. But once it was wide awake, from that point on, it would run just fine. I did play Riptide GP2 for about 45 minutes, and during that time it ran well enough for me to continue playing without frustration. That said, there were times with very noticeable frame loss and stuttering, but again, it wasn't bad enough for me to rage quit out of frustration. When benchmarked on Geekbench, it scored a single core score of 427 and a multi-core score of 2103, and with Antutu, it scored 26,713, which is just below the Galaxy S4. So now let's talk about the battery life. It comes with one 2600 milliamp hour battery, and during my testing, I'd say I went pretty hard on it with about 45 minutes of gaming, 45 minutes of Netflix, and about 20 minutes of YouTube. By the time I decided I should throw it on the charger, it was down to about 5%. But I can't help feel like it could be much better with a software update, because it seems that in battery stats, Android system seems to take a big chunk, and I can't help thinking there's several wake locks preventing the device from actually sleeping. So unless you're always near a wall outlet, I don't think this phone's a good choice for a heavy user that relies on their phone to get them through the day with heavy media consumption. But for more of a light user that consumes a minimal amount of media and mainly texts and makes some phone calls here and there. And I noticed the Wi-Fi strength was quite a bit weaker than phones from major OEMs. Like for instance, in my office with my Xperia Z2, I get full Wi-Fi strength because my router sits just behind me. But with this device, it seems to bounce around between 2 to 3 bars. And so finally that brings us to the camera. So on the front we have a 5 megapixel and on the back is a 13 megapixel. Both front and back take decent enough pictures, but I really wasn't all that happy with the few pictures I took with the front-facing camera. And when I tried to use the camera app's gesture capture, it seemed to work the first time and then start taking pictures randomly without even using the gestures. And you can probably see my confusion with that in the pictures that should be showing now. The back camera handled okay, but if you're wanting to capture as much detail and color accuracy as possible, then you might want to increase your phone budget. On my recent trip to the garden store, I decided to take some pictures of not just the flowers, but also some well and lower lit areas. The flowers looked okay, but were definitely blown out and not nearly as sharp as what's produced by more premium devices. And when I snapped a shot of an area that had both good and low light, it turned out really strange. The well lit area seemed okay, but the lower lit side of it was really dark, much more so than in true life. But again, for $180, I wouldn't expect much better. And to spice the deal up a bit, it does come with a screen protector already installed and a flip case in the box. There's also the usual charger with North American adapter and a pair of earbud headphones. All in all, I think it's a pretty good deal for the money. You're getting a phone running Android 4.4.2 KitKat, which for the most part performs just fine, a 1080p display, and 2 half-decent cameras. The battery may not last a full day for a heavy user, but at the same time, if all you're wanting to do is snap the odd picture, send some texts, and make a few phone calls throughout the day with perhaps even the odd YouTube video, there's no point in forking out around $700 for a device with a bigger battery and features you're not going to use too often. So I'll put a link in the description below for pricing and availability, but that's it for this one. If you like this video, do me a favor and hit that like button, and at the same time, if you haven't already, maybe subscribe to stay up to date on all of my future videos. But thanks as always for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Cheers.